Welcome to Girls Gone Hallmark, a Hallmark review podcast. I'm Megan, and I'm a longtime Hallmark movie fan.
I'm Wendy. I'm a former Hallmark hater.
Today, yes. Today we have a very special guest joining us. Before we introduce them, as a reminder, after the podcast, you can join us on Instagram. We have 2 accounts. We are Megan and Wendy. We're also Girls Gone Hallmark.
Hey, jump into our Facebook group, Girls Gone Hallmark. Lots of cool people over there, and they're going to go bananas once they hear who we have to hear today.
They are. Remind me to tell you a little Facebook group intel about today's guest. And as always, we have thoughts on the movies we're reviewing, on our episodes. You can email us, girlsgonehallmark@gmail.com. But today, we are pinching ourselves as we are joined by none other than Kimberley Sustad, writer, actress, and all-around cool girl. She stars in this weekend's movie, The Real West, alongside Lucas Bryant, and we cannot wait to talk all things writing and acting and to share a little bit of a confession with you, which is it's not bad. This summer, we were actually looking back over our episodes, and you were
Tell me everything.
Let's
just be real.
For sure. We're in at least 4 episodes that we discussed this summer. Over the summer, we did A Bride for Christmas. We did a full signed, sealed, delivered summer. So we had you in one of those signed, sealed, delivered episodes. And we did both of the 9 Lives, 9 Kittens movie. And in one of those episodes, we talked about how I notoriously am not cool. And of all the people we could potentially run into, I would completely have no chill if we were to ever meet you. We're on the Hallmark Channel Christmas cruise this year. And
yay.
Yeah. And
Which one?
The first one. Oh no, I see that face. Wendy told me I needed to take some being cool lessons in anticipation of the cruise because
we're all so not cool. I am the least cool of them all. So
then you're a fantastic actor because you have the coolest vibe of ever. You just come across as the cool girl. So
really?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes.
Like cool. I've always wanted to be cool.
Well,
maybe that's me just trying like my hardest.
It comes across as effortless. So
I'm wildly insecure.
Oh,
so
me too.
I think it's mostly hiding. Do you know what I mean? Like from all like the things like this. I never really do these things or podcasts. You caught me at a weak moment because I had just said yes to a different one, and then your request was literally sitting there, and I was like, okay, sure, I'll do 2. But the reason is because I leave these things, and the mental gymnastics in my brain that begin to happen are never worth it. I regret that, or you know what I mean? Like it's just like this hour and a half after going, I don't even think I answered a question or I finished a thought, or did I sound remotely smart at all? So, I like...
That's 100% me too.
Live in my brain just like a panic attack waiting to happen all the time.
Well, we notoriously don't do, I'm sorry, I stepped on you, but don't do a lot of interviews for that reason because I, first of all, am in like a full body sweat the entire time. And then afterwards, I'm terrified going into it. Like, are they going to think we're the biggest bozos? And then afterwards, I dissect every question we asked, every response I had. So we only do interviews with people that we're super excited to talk about.
For sure.
Yes.
For sure.
That's why I wear black, because I just sweat through everything else.
Yes.
Look at, we're all got the black memo today.
Yeah. I want to throw it way back. I did dig into your IMDb resume and saw that your first listed project is a movie called Thunderballs about a beer league bowling team. And then the next year after that, you were in A Bride for Christmas on Hallmark, which, as I mentioned, we talked about this summer and really loved. It's kind of almost ahead of its time in terms of Hallmark movies. And so my question is, like, what is your acting origin story and then landing on Hallmark? How did that all play out?
I started around that time, actually. And I was living in Seattle at the time, and I was doing, I've always loved theater. And Seattle is got one of the most, outside of New York City, vibrant theater communities you could ever find yourself in. I just happened to be there, living there. And so I started getting involved in working at, my first job was at ACT, which was crazy. And that was a really wild ride, and learned from some of the best people in that cast, and did a number of shows there. And that really taught me how to break things down. And then Andy Tennant, my agent, who was like my theater agent at the time, knew that Andy Tennant was casting this. And so I don't know if you knew this, the director of Thunderballs and writer, he wrote Anna and the King and all those like really incredible 90s rom-coms like Fool's Gold and
wow.
the Matthew McConaughey movies and the Kate Hudsons and like all of those, like Bounty Hunter with Jennifer Aniston. And I was a massive fan because I loved 90s rom-coms, like just all of them, and obsessively watch them still. And so I really wanted to meet him, and they set up a meeting, and I got a part of this lead character in his TV show. And it was working with Norm from Cheers, and the cast was really, really funny and really incredible. Unfortunately, the show never got picked up, and so it became like a TV movie, but it was a pilot, and it never really found a home, but it was a really funny show. And it was a really wonderful experience working with him and picking his brain all about writing rom-coms. Little did I know, like 10 years later, I would start writing them myself. And so that sort of kicked off my film career, because I was working at the Cheesecake Factory, actually, in downtown Seattle, slinging cheesecakes in my pleated khaki pants and my white Oxford shirt, kill me now, and my anti-slip shoes.
Yeah.
Definitely like not hot waitress wardrobe. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes you go to those restaurants and I'm like, ooh, like I feel like schleppy, and I'm like at your restaurant. You look like you're headed to the club, you know? Not the wardrobe at the Cheesecake Factory at all. And so I was working there, and I got that job and filmed over the summer, and just was like, oh my gosh, if you work in film, you don't have to have a waitressing job, because if you work in theater, you really do.
Yeah.
Unless you're in a hit Broadway show on Broadway or something like that. So that's kind of what got me interested in film. And I drove up, because I was living in Seattle, and I'm Canadian as well and American. I drove up to Vancouver. This is a horrible story, but I lied and I said I lived there, which little did I know I would end up living here. And I got an agent like that same day, which was crazy because I didn't live there. And I drove home and had this agent, and I was like, what am I going to do now? Yeah. Like, I don't live in Vancouver, but I knew that they had this like incredible film, they're the Hollywood North, right? Like so much is happening here. It's I think still the second largest industry of film in the world. So I started driving for like my one-line auditions to Vancouver. And I was so like, they would get so in my head. And again, the anxiety, like mental gymnastics person that I am, that doesn't even make sense. But let's say that did make sense. Like I would replay this line. My very first line was white wine, please. That was it. By the time I got to that audition, I was so worked up and so nervous, like completely sweating through all of my clothes. And you had to like stand on this little mark. I knew nothing about auditioning for camera whatsoever. I just had gotten this job, right? And that job happened to be kind of really, it was a comedy, and that felt really natural to me. But I had no idea how to audition for film. And anyways, I bombed so hardcore. I could not get out white wine, please. And no matter how much I tried, could not say the line. My leg was shaking so fast. My hand, like the paper in my hand was doing this. And that was the beginning of my career. I don't know how I made it to where I am right now from there. I like, honest to God, don't know why I'm sitting in front of you today. It feels like a total mistake, but here I am.
Well, I was listening back to one of those interviews to bounce off your comment about me being a mistake. Wendy said her quote was something like, you know how everybody wants Tyler Hynes in every movie? She said, I want Kimberley Sustad in every movie. I want her to write it and star in it. And that just needs to be like one every quarter. So it definitely doesn't feel like a mistake from the viewer standpoint.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is something
kind.
Well, and it's true, but I don't know if this is something
so true.
It's something that's out there. But we have a Facebook group member. His name's Mike, and he's posted this publicly. So I think it's cool. But like, you know, some of the dudes have their fandoms. Famously, there's the Heinies. He calls his fandom the Sustads. And I don't know if that's a thing that you're aware of, but you have your own hashtag as well. So
I did not know that.
Isn't that, it makes me laugh every time I think about it. Fast forwarding, your movie The Real West is coming out this weekend. Like a year ago, there was an interview that said you and Paul were working on a movie, My Week in Wyoming. Now, we've definitely read these articles and had people be like, we didn't say that. We just assumed that was this movie, but obviously neither of the two of you are credited as writers on that movie, but they feel like a similar vibe.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can say about that, or do you want me to pretend like I didn't ask that question?
No, not at all. We're still working on that movie.
Okay.
Nice. And it's not this one.
Okay.
So yeah, this one was just a completely different, like I wound up in a Real West movie before the other one happens to be completed. So yeah, they don't step on each other at all.
Yeah.
They're completely different. Like you couldn't be further apart. One's a very Paul and Kimberley movie.
Yeah.
You know, that has yet to see the light of day. But this one, yeah, not written by us, but equally as lovely. James Denton actually worked on this and put this into production for quite some time. So this was his baby, actually. And he's in it. And he's kind of like the wise cowboy, you know, who is ever knowing and has all of the really wise things to say at all the right times, kind of.
I love that. And is this your first time working with Lucas Bryant on screen?
Yeah.
And growing up, were you like a quote horse girl? Like, or were you into, is this like realizing a childhood dream?
I did. I grew up riding. My mom, we had horses our whole lives. She raised Arabians, actually.
Oh, wow.
And when you talk about like horse obsessed, my mom was that and then some.
Yeah.
And I begrudgingly was in it, not really wanting to as a kid, but didn't have a choice. My sister and I both had to ride horses.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started loving it. And now it feels like, you know, that thing when your parents used to force you to play piano or something like that, and then you have that skill. and you get back to that skill, you're like, oh yeah, I really love this. Like, when you're an adult, this is so wonderful. It felt that way to finally use a skill that I have had for so long and never used, for anything other than like just going riding with my mom. So it was really lovely that Hallmark helped me realize that dream.
It looked so, we saw that reel that you posted, and it looks so beautiful. We know you started acting and then you started writing. Do you have aspirations to do more? Like, that reel was so beautifully put together. I was like, oh, she should be directing. Is that a goal of yours? You're like, I got enough going on.
That reel is a page I rip out of Tyler Hines' ability to like obviously we're together a lot. Paul and I have written many movies for him.
Yeah.
And I've around him all the time on these movies behind the scenes. And, we're putting I watch him put these things together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so technologically like unable that he'll sit with me and it's almost to make him proud, actually. So if Tyler listens to this, he has sat so many times trying to teach me how to make a reel that I can't get it together. And I'm like still sort of being able to do it. But what he can do, he'll capture everything on his phone. And then somehow he gets it into the reels on Instagram. I have no idea how to do that. Mine are all filmed through Instagram. And then I can't go out of order. So it's not as great as you thought it looked. It was I'm so handcuffed because I cannot figure out how to pull actual footage off your video, from your phone to this thing. Suddenly this interview became so boring as I go through this.
No.
But anyway.
But I think that makes it even
Everyone's
better.
Like, oh my God, stop talking about slicing together a reel. But I'm trying to make Tyler Hines proud. So it's nothing about being a director. Mostly going the hours you've spent. He's on vacation sometimes and I'm calling him going, okay, how do I put music to the thing? He's like, oh my God, Kimmy, just Google it. I'm like, I can't Google it and it doesn't go in my brain. So please just tell me again.
I can't click away from this screen or I've lost everything.
Or I'm going to lose it. And he's like, oh my gosh. And he'll stop what he's doing and be like, okay, now press the thing. Great. Set it to the music. Okay. You got that? All right. Bye, hun. And then
I got to go save a goose from the barbed wire.
I do it to make him proud. And I saw he commented "giddy up" on there, and I was like, he saw it. He knows.
Good. He knows. Look,
he keeps telling me to post more because people want to see, and I don't, because again, it's part of this. Every time you go to post something, there's this wildly insecure thing that always pops up. I go, oh, that's so dumb. Nobody is going to think that's cool, or everyone's going to be like, okay, we don't care. You know what I mean? I just feel. Why would anybody want to know this right now? So
yeah, I can heavily relate to that. The number of things I have in draft that never see the light of day because I talk myself out of it. But here's the thing I tell myself all the time. First of all, people are following you because they like you. No one's forced them to follow you. And they want more, it's your platform. They want to see your stuff. So, but
you don't see
the get it.
Hundreds of people you lose every time you post something. I mean, what did I do? Oh,
it's funny though, because we posted a reel the other day and I posted a screenshot of the 30 clips that it took to get 1 minute. The difference is you actually got it all without having to cut all that stuff out. So give yourself some credit. Anyway, it was beautiful and it made me 100%. Not that we weren't going to watch the movie, but it did its job. It promoted the movie.
I think it's a really good movie. I wouldn't, because again, I'm too insecure to actually say it, but I think we have when you get a feeling,
something special.
Yeah, I had that. And the response at Hallmark so far, because they obviously have it, has been so enough for people to write notes and say, and not often do they do that. take the time to say, this movie is really beautiful.
Oh, that's nice.
So I think it's got a really great level of romance. There's a little bit of comedy built in there. The script wasn't. I'm going into this, even though you didn't.
Please, I love it. No, I want to know everything.
I'll just continue to second guess myself every time I change something.
No, don't. So, we love it.
I know sometimes people really want things to be funny, and they are, but you can't really press or push something when it wants to lend itself to romance.
Yeah.
Or the feeling that you have when you're around horses and in nature, it lends itself to more of a sentimental. It's not dramatic. It has some drama to it at all, but it is wildly romantic.
Mm-hmm.
And there are bits and parts of it that are funny as well, as I desperately try to find these things, in a character, because I think, who are we if we can't laugh at ourselves, right? It at least helps alleviate the pressures we put on ourselves. So, yeah, I think it's special because I think it'll impact people and touch people. And we're wrestling with some really hard things, or my character is. And I think that'll be very relatable to people, as we all have heavy blankets that we carry. So anyway, I think it was great to do that. And for my Christmas one, I'm heading into it's super funny. The script, it's written that way. It's so fast. And the different challenge for me right now, as I'm working on it, is finding the moments of sentimentality, or the moments where the audience or that I want to fight for my own character, where I go, how do I relate to you? I always try to find that, and I think sometimes when it's just so funny, we can get swept away in the fun of it. But I think for a movie to be so truly impactful, it has to have moments where we see ourselves and we go, that's me. And that's why I'm crying.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's the way I feel this way. We want to feel when we watch a movie.
Yep,
sure.
We need to feel. And if it doesn't have that, we really, we need to find it. We need to make that happen, because I really don't want to do a movie that doesn't service that. And so I'm always looking to make sure all those dynamics are in place. So.
Yeah, I love.
You asked me none of this, and
I love it. I love it.
That's nice.
So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit to Countdown to Christmas. We know you co-wrote Three Wiser Men with Paul, and you guys brought Russell into the writing team this time around.
Side note: Russell wrote this movie that I'm doing.
Oh, that's amazing!
It's so funny, and so all of our worlds, have collided this past year.
So that answers one of our questions: is we are going to get a Kimberley Sustad movie during Countdown to Christmas that you are starring in. That is excellent news. Throwing it back to Three Wiser Men, can you give us any hints what to expect there? Is there any teasers you can throw at us?
I will say this: that movie took so long, because not really long in the scope of a strike and everything that we dealt with in the in-between since the first one came out. But man, when you deal with second guessing yourself as much as I do, I really didn't want to disappoint people, because I knew and had heard firsthand of what the first one meant to so many, and to single moms, and to moms out there, and to family dynamics. And I think and to people with anxiety, and I think it hits a number of things in people that you can only hope for when you write a movie. And so then there was this weight of, well, where do we go from here? And that was a really hard question to answer for a while. And Paul and I both really got in our own way for some of it. And Russell did help us come through that as well, because sometimes you get so locked in the forest, you can't see through it. And there were times that was, oh gosh, it stressed me out so much. But long and short, it's beautiful. And I've heard from other people's responses that they think it's better than the first. And
wow.
I think it's really good. It's really funny. So Thomas is 5 now.
Yeah.
And in kindergarten. And, you know, when Paul and I write, we try to make our character, like, where can we put our characters into the most trouble? Right? We need to get them into trouble, because that's where comedy comes out of. And that's where good writing comes out of. And that, you know, all of the different genres. So Thomas in kindergarten seems like a great opportunity for trouble.
Yeah.
And a new sort of bag of troubles. And I don't want to ruin, because the cliffhanger at the end of Act 1, where we kind of go, oh, now this is what we're dealing with, is sort of what the whole family dynamic has to begin to deal with. And I don't want to ruin that, but it's a big one that becomes a through line. That's not just Thomas in kindergarten. And so they all, like, it's just this huge shocker. And then they're wrestling with that through the whole movie in a really hilarious, in a really funny way. But it's really good. And Mom has, one thing that was important to me was that Margaret, our mom, Collins, I just loved her so much in the first one. She had this really raw, unfiltered way about her and her style of acting. Like, you knew her for 1,000 years. And I was like, it's very important to me that we want her storyline now. We want to know about her. We want to like her there the whole time. And what is she going to wrestle with? And so that was really fun for me, because I put a lot of the things that I wrestle with in with her. So there's a lot of my story in her that will come out. And she did it so beautifully. And her own story also of, you know, who she is, and her life is in there too. And she's so good in it. And we passed a big part of this project over to her in this. And I think people are going to really resonate with it. So
I think that's,
I know that's really broad.
No, I mean, we want to watch it. We want to be surprised. But I think that's the beauty of doing a sequel, is like, we've met the guys, we have the baseline. Now you have the opportunity to dig in a little bit more on some of these other characters. So I like that we're fleshing her out a little bit more.
And I can see, I think one of the biggest themes, I can say this because it won't ruin it. It's more like the way that I think about characters. I'm looking at my wall because I'm thinking this is my next writing project. This is my wall of madness.
Oh, wow. Like a sneak peek.
You establish these characters, and then I just thought, you know, now how do we deal with all of the things that they were dealing with in the first? And the thing that came to me for the sequel was, okay, we get into life and we go through the things that have been handed to us or given to us or that we've worked for. But then we all have this human struggle of feeling like we're enough. Like, whatever it is, like, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And we like battle and we come up against that. And that was really important to me for all of them to now have this like struggle with, okay, so now that you're a dad, or now that you're this, or now that you've overcome that, like, then it's like, but am I enough? You know, am I loved? Am I seen? Am I valued? Am I heard? Am I anything? You know, that we are just looking for that kind of validation in life. And so they do wrestle with that. And I think a lot of people will resonate with that. and they wrestle with that in all of their own character ways. So
yeah. How did you and Paul get started writing together?
I did a movie with him called Godwink Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And when we were doing that movie, it was the first time I met him also. And I hadn't done, I think I hadn't done a ton of Hallmarks before then as well. I was doing a Netflix show before that. And so it was my first experience with Paul, and he had done so many by that time. It was a really sentimental script.
Yeah.
And it was dealing with like a lot of spiritual things, and like, he's so irreverent. Like in between takes, like he had me in stitches about like just everything else that had nothing to do with the script.
Yeah.
I've never laughed so much with somebody. And we had a very similar style of humor. Like we just spoke a very similar language. And he was like, it's a real shame that like this one's not funny at all. And like, we can't make it funny because, we're dealing with God and like these like really heavy subjects. Too bad like we didn't get to do a comedy, like I'd love to do something with a comedy. And I was like, well, actually I have an idea. And I pitched him this idea, which was Starlight by Christmas by Starlight.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, I love that. Let's write it. And I was like, like, sure. He's like, yeah, we could totally write that. And I'm like, okay. You meet actors on set, and sometimes, there's all these things like, oh, we'll see you again, and we're best friends. And like, it's one of the most heartbreaking industries to be in, because then you never see that person again. They go back to LA, or you go back, into your lives, and crossing paths is like, it's very rare you do another movie with someone, the same person. There's certainly the odd, like Nikki DeLoach's and
Andrew Walker,
Brennan, and Lacey and things like that. But for anybody else, it's pretty rare. And 5 months later, and I think Paul was living in LA at that time. 5 months later, he came over and he was like, he brought cue cards and he's like, hey, let's write this. I'm like, what?
Just like that.
And I still to this day use these stupid cue cards. This is exactly how I like put out, like do a movie. I go act 1 to act 9, put it on the wall, and then each cue card, I'm trying not so people don't screenshot and like zoom in. I know they're going to. Good luck trying to read my scribble. And I put every scene by scene, like through down under act 1. And Paul and I still organize these stinking movies the same way he came over that day with the cue cards. We don't know how else to do it. And we just started blocking out Christmas by Starlight. And we wrote the entire thing on spec. Wow. And we were headed to a TCA event at Hallmark. And at the time, Randy Pope was in charge, or he was the number 2 there. And this was back in the Bill Abbott days. And we were like, hey, can we pop into Hallmark before the whole event? We just want to like, talk to you about something. He's like, sure. We kind of gave him the idea for this movie. And he's like, oh, I love that. Like, that's sweet. We'll think about it, which they always do that. And then I was like, well, don't think about it, because we wrote it. And we handed him this. And he was like, you guys wrote the movie? I was like, yeah, we did. We wrote it completely on spec. And he was like, okay, I'll read it. I'm actually headed to New York the next day, so I'll read it on the plane. And he got back to us. He's like, I love it. The script is good. I think people like actors or whatever, like hand people their project and it's like, no, well, maybe we'll hire writers or something like that. But that's how it started. We just like went out on a whim, did it for free, wrote the thing, and they started asking us to do more. So that's how that happened. Yeah.
That was my follow-up question. I'm like, do they just come to you guys now and say, hey, give us something. We want something from you guys.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's amazing.
And we come to them with what, we'd like to do or what we're thinking about or the next sort of project that we are dreaming up that we'd, like to do. So we have a few in there as a follow-up to our next. Yeah.
So does that mean that when you and Paul are writing, you typically write together in person?
No, not always.
No. Okay. Do you have like a virtual cue card system?
We will often break the movie in person. So that I'm not going to show you because I know people are going to like, this one's his handwriting. That one's my handwriting. We break the entire movie together and then we write separately. So in person, it's a lot easier to like get this whole movie up on the board. And then we go our separate ways and we write separately. And then we pass back the script back and forth.
Speaking of writing, Wendy Eagle Eye noticed this morning on IMDb, there is an Untitled Project written by Joel Dovev and Margot Froley that you and Ashley Williams are credited on. Is there anything at all you can tell us about that? Or is that just... That's the extent of it.
How did that get out there?
I know. It's on IMDb. Someone put it there.
What can I say? We are working on something and it's...
that's a dream team right there. That's a killer team.
It's really good.
Well, I believe
it's really good. Yeah.
We were just discussing the most recent cases of Mystery Lane, and I'm shocked that they've only written so few things. Like, those movies are so good that I feel like everything they come up with is going to be so
Isn't that funny?
Good.
I thought the same thing and then totally stole them.
No. Yeah. You're like, oh, they're mine now.
I know. I was like, could you share the writer's contact with me? He's like, what? They're really funny. I was saying this to Paul on Friday because his movie came out. I'm sure you guys watched it, but I'm like, it feels like Only Murders in the Building in that like style. You did?
Yes.
I'm like, they don't have one like that where there is some broad comedy in there and it's quirky, and Paul really gets to do what he was built for.
Didn't I say that today?
Yes.
Like when he came out in the salsa
bare chest
dancing, but how he put on that character, I was like, you owned that and the pants, and the yoga shorts. And like, I don't know, he's just made for that style of comedy. And he's so funny. And they let him go. And I think it would be such a shame if they didn't do more because Only Murders in the Building does so well because they're fun. They're fun to watch, they're cozy mysteries. And at times you're like, Martin Short and Steve Martin and Martin Short are like, they're so broad and ridiculous. And so many of the characters, like Meryl comes on and is like this, but that's fun. It's fun to watch these people do that and to put these characters on. And I think they're having that same kind of fun with cases. And so I was like, I thought it was so fun. And we need that. We need those in our life. So
I think so too.
I'm so excited you're working with them because we love what we know. When it comes to like writing versus acting, do you have a favorite or are you just excited to get to balance them both?
Yeah, I love them both. Writing, I love being in these because I get to realize my 90s rom-com fangirl dream of doing these movies. I don't get to be in the big budget ones, but I do get to do them and live out this dream. And so that I really love. And the writing is extraordinarily satisfying. When you get to hand in a script and I pour so much of myself into the characters. There's something like really cathartic about that.
Sure.
seeing
you do that in acting,
come to reality.
But when you really get to write the dialogue of what somebody's going through, or, that feels very cathartic too. So it's so satisfying in a completely different way.
Huge, huge thank you for being here. This is so amazing. We know our listeners are loving it. In the moments that you're not overthinking your social media presence, where can people find you in between movies?
What do you mean? They could come to my house. You can find me there in my sweatpants suit, strolling across the street to go pick up my kids, which is so funny because my daughter the other day, she was like, "Do you think you could change?"
How old is she?
You mean like put on clothes? She's like, yeah. She's 9.
Oh yeah, that unfortunately doesn't get better. We both have teenage daughters. Yeah. I mean, social media wise, like Instagram, Twitter, where are you hanging out, if anywhere?
If anywhere, it's just Instagram. I have no capacity for anything else because of my overthinking ways. So I'm barely on Instagram, but you can find me there.
And on Instagram, you are Kimberley Sustad. It's Kimberley. I'm sure people misspell it all the time. I did notice on IMDb in your early works, you are credited as LY. Was that just a mistake early on, or was...
I don't know. They still do that. It's just one of those things that
there's like 10 of them, and they're like as LY. Anyway.
Yeah, I think LY still happens. I wish it was just LY.
Yeah. Megan is the same way. Everyone spells it differently. So people try to overcomplicate things.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Girls Gone Hallmark. If you love this podcast, we love your 5-star ratings and reviews. You can leave them in the Apple Podcast app. We'll see you next time. Be sure to tune into
Oh, I can't wait to tell you a story after you're done. Okay, go do your thing.
Be sure to tune into The Real West this Saturday on the Hallmark Channel to see Kimberley, Lucas Bryant, James Denton. And we'll be back with the review of that next week. Goodbye.